Hello and welcome to another bearing installation video featuring Boca bearings. Did you know that having a set of fresh and high quality bearings in your glow engine is really one of the best things you can do to preserve the longevity and peak performance of your engine? Well, now you do. And that is why I will be installing a new set of Boca bearings into an OS FS70 Surpass engine today. Now this is a recent acquisition of mine that looks like it's a very low time engine, but when it was used, it would appear that it was a long time ago by the way the engine felt. Thus, I need to replace the bearings in it. So let's get right to the table and do this bearing removal and installation using some new Boca bearings. Okay, so here on the table I've got all the tools necessary for me to remove the bearings in this beautiful OS FS70 Surpass engine. I mean, this engine just externally it just looked brand new, but it does have some runtime on it and some usage. In fact, in the intro I mentioned that it was just so dry feeling and rough feeling. I really had to load the crankcase with a lot of oil just to get it apart. So what I've got on the table to assist me here is a piece of wood that I'm going to use to tap the crankshaft out. Either a wood dowel or a flat nose punch to pop that front bearing out. My light hammer, my desk vise, my heat gun, and my protective mitt to keep my hand protected. So what I'm going to do first is just go ahead and heat this crankcase and crankshaft up, and we'll get these bearings out. Let's see if that happens to be enough to get this crankshaft to come out. It is coming out. I'm trying to see if the bearing is coming out with it. Not so sure. It looks like that's happening. Oh, it did come out with it. Okay, good. And it's not too hot. Okay, so our crankshaft and rear bearing is out. Now all we got to do is just pop this front bearing out. And that dowel looks like it might be just big enough to fit in there, and that's about it. Maybe it's not. Okay, let's go to our short nose punch. Trying to get an edge on that. And that front bearing's out now too. Yeah, that was just a little bit too tight for that wood dowel to go in there. So we've got the front bearing out. You can see that's a pretty gnarly looking bearing. Now, that's not too hot. I think I should be able to just tap this thing off of here. So the process for doing this now is I'll just use a larger punch and just tap down on that. So let me get my really nice sized punch here. Set this up like this and just alternately go around. Feels like it's a little stubborn, but it's coming. And I just kind of rotate the bearing around and get all around the sides. And there it is. Rear bearing is off. Also, for a fairly low time engine, this bearing is pretty gnarly looking. It doesn't feel super bad. It's not smooth, but it doesn't feel like it was on the verge of failure. But anyway, so that's out. And you can see there's going to be a little bit of cleaning that needs to take place here. So I'm going to turn the camera off, go clean up these parts, and get ready for the bearing installation section. Okay, so Now that the crankcase and crankshaft are all cleaned up, I've got all the tools out here necessary for me to do this bearing installation. I've got the same hammer, piece of wood, and now I've been using my really beat up short socket extension just as a drive to drive that crankshaft in with the main bearing. And I've still got the same desk vise, my Boca bearings, and a jar that I can remove the lid of now because I use this to dispense Boca bearings road power. And I use this as a reassembly lubricant, especially when doing bearings. And I don't know that I've got a whole lot in here, so I'll just usually do one little squirt in that, and then I'll just go ahead and lubricate those parts up. First, before we do that, I want to take this bearing kit out. This is kit number ENK-081. I think I already had it open. So just for the heck of it, when I threw those parts in to clean, I threw the ball bearings in too. Not that I plan on reusing them at all, but I just wanted to kind of show that they cleaned up a little bit. I mean, not a whole lot, but so Boca does make a couple of products that if you have lightly used bearings that could potentially be revitalized and reused. I'm not saying I would recommend doing that for an RC glow engine, but I have done it in the past. They do make a couple of products that assist you in that, and one of them is called Clean Touch, which is a really good solvent that will enable you to get these parts really cleaned up. And then the other product is called Bearing Soak, and that is a product similar to, it's just an oil-based product where you put it, I put it in a glass container and you just let the bearings soak in there for 15-20 minutes, and it forms a molecular bond with the steel parts, the balls and the races in that, and it extends the life and reduces friction dramatically, and it really does a really fantastic job. Now I'm not going to do that with these bearings, but I just threw them in the cleaner there just to see how they would come out. So here's our rear bearing, and it's already ready to go. It's got both, it's an open cage bearing, so there's no shields or seals to remove. This front bearing is a double shielded ZZ style. So I'm going to be removing one side of that, the side that faces inside. So for me to do that, I had a small precision screwdriver that I use. And for me to remove the seal, or this shield, I just get in here right just above the inner race and just push down just enough to get under that metal shield and just lift it up and out, just like that. Very simple process. So now this bearing is ready to be installed. All bearings are ready to be installed, so I'm going to go ahead and just use my finger and lubricate all the bearing mating surfaces, or where the bearing is going to be touching the engine. And actually what I'm going to do is, as long as I've got the sleeve out, I'm going to go ahead and lubricate the inside of this cylinder too, to facilitate the installation of the sleeve later on. And here I'm going to lubricate this area here, the crankshaft, the entire crankshaft really. Just, I mean, it can't hurt to have everything have a light coating of oil on it. So all of that stuff is ready to go. Now it's just get down to business here. So what I always do is, when I install the bearings, I'll always install the front one first and then the rear. And what I like to do is I put the bearing on the rear on the crankshaft, and this was a very tight fitting bearing coming off, so I don't anticipate anything different here. Sometimes I can just slide this thing on, other times it kind of requires me to walk it on a bit. Oops. And then sometimes I just flip it around to the other side and see if it's a little more willing to go that way. Yeah, this was a really tight fitting bearing, so it's going to get driven on the rest of the way when I put it in to the crankshaft. But that's why I put the front bearing on first, is so that it acts as a centering mechanism, so that these two items go in there nice and straight. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my glove on, wipe my hand off one more time, put my glove on, heat this crankcase up. Let's let's install some bearings. Let's see if that's enough here. Okay, that one's in. Let's drop this guy in place here. Have to close this up a little bit. Okay. Kind of tell by the way it sounds when that bearing is fully inserted and fully driven in, as it is now. And that's really all there is to installing a new high quality set of Boca bearings. Now this engine is ready for reassembly and off to a new home or to the test bench, whichever may come first.